You have walked into a Costco 1,000 times. You know the smell: rotisserie chicken, cardboard, and cold air. You know the sound of the concrete floor under a cart the size of a bathtub. You know the pallets stacked to the ceiling, like a warehouse forgot to hide itself. You know the sample tables. You know the man at the exit who checks your receipt and draws one line on it. And you know the feeling on the way out. The feeling that you just won something. So imagine you own it. Imagine the whole thing is yours. It feels like a store. It is not a store. In fiscal year 2024, Costco reported net sales of $249.6 billion. Net income was $7.4 billion. That is a lot of chicken, but neither of those is the number that runs this company. The number that runs this company is $4.8 billion, and you paid part of it before you touched a single thing on a shelf. Start at the door, because that is where the money starts. Before you own anything here, you charge people to walk in. That is the first move. That is the whole move. As of September 1st, 2024, an individual membership in the United States and Canada costs $65 per year. It used to cost $60. An executive membership costs $130 per year. It used to cost $120. Those are small numbers. Hold on to them anyway. That single price change touched roughly 52 million memberships. A little over half of those were executive members. You did not sell anything to trigger that revenue. You did not stock a shelf. You did not hire a cashier. You changed a number on a form, and the money arrived. Now look at what the money has to cover. You are not running one building. As of August 31st, 2025, Costco operated 914 warehouses worldwide. A year earlier, it was 890. In fiscal 2024 alone, the company opened 29 net new locations. 23 of those were in the United States. These are not small buildings. A Costco warehouse is roughly the footprint of 2.5 football fields. The company owns most of the land under them. That is deliberate. Rent is the one cost a retailer can never negotiate down forever. So the entry price for you, as the owner, is enormous. Land, steel, refrigeration, forklifts, loading docks, a fuel station out front, and a parking lot big enough to be visible from orbit. And then the entry price for your customer is $65. You are running two completely different businesses at the same time. One of them is capital-intensive, slow, and brutal. The other one is a subscription, and only one of them is profitable. Notice the order of operations, because the order is the whole design. In fiscal 2024, the membership base reached nearly 137 million cardholders. Every one of those cards was paid for in advance, not billed later, not earned through loyalty points. Paid, up front, before a single item was scanned. Here is where it gets interesting. That changes what kind of company you are on a balance sheet. You are collecting cash before you deliver anything. Your customers are financing your inventory. A conventional retailer buys goods, holds them, and hopes. You are paid to be allowed to try. And the fee does something else, quieter and more powerful. It filters. A $65 door charge removes the casual visitor entirely. Nobody wanders in. Nobody browses idly. Every person walking your floor has already declared an intention to spend. Your foot traffic is smaller than a supermarket's and worth far more per body. That is why the layout can be hostile. No signage worth mentioning. Products moved on purpose. Concrete underfoot and pallets at eye level. A normal store cannot do that because a normal store must convert strangers. You do not have strangers. You have subscribers. So you spend nothing on the things that persuade a stranger. No advertising budget of consequence. No decoration. No pretty shelving. That money goes into the price instead. The $65 does not buy the customer a product. It buys them permission. Permission to be sold to at a price that no ordinary retailer can match. You have inverted the entire relationship. In a normal store, the customer arrives with nothing owed and decides whether to spend. In your store, the customer arrives having already spent and now has to justify it. That is the mechanism. That is the actual engine. And it never appears on a price tag. You did not pay to shop. You bought a seat at a table you do not own. Now walk further in, because the next set of costs is already waiting for you. You did not choose them. You inherited them. Every new owner of this business inherits them, and none of them can be quietly deleted. The first one is payroll. Costco employed 341,000 people worldwide as of August 31st, 2025. In early 2025, the company set a minimum wage of $20 per hour. Top of scale for senior service clerks reached $31.90 per hour. The average hourly wage in the United States and Canada moved above $30. Under a 3-year labor agreement, another $1 raise was locked in for March 2026. Another was locked in for March 2027. The raises are locked in, not proposed, locked. You cannot cut that. Not because a law stops you, but because the entire building runs on it. Costco reports a 1-year employee retention rate of roughly 93%. The retail industry routinely runs annual turnover between 60 and 70%. That gap is not sentiment. That gap is money. Every departure costs you a hiring cycle, a training cycle, and a period of slower, worse work. Low turnover is not a reward you hand out. It is a cost you avoid by paying more upfront. The second inherited obligation is stranger and smaller and much harder to escape. The hot dog costs $1.50. Read that again. It has cost $1.50 since 1985. That is the hot dog and the soda together. Costco sells roughly 199 million of them per year, according to figures given by former Chief Financial Officer Richard Galanti. Do the arithmetic on 1985. Every input in that combination has risen. Beef, buns, cups, syrup, labor, packaging, electricity. The price has not moved once in 4 decades. A former chief executive once raised this with co-founder Jim Sinegal. He explained that the combination was losing money. Sinegal told him, in language far less polite than this, that the price would not change. He was told to go and solve the problem instead. So Costco solved the problem. It built its own hot dog production plant and brought the product under the Kirkland Signature name. It did not raise the price. It removed the supplier. That is the pattern you inherit. When a cost rises here, you are not allowed to pass it to the member. You are required to go upstream and kill the cost. Every retailer says it will not pass costs on. Almost none of them mean it. The difference here is that the refusal has been public and unbroken for 40 years. That converts it into something closer to a contract, and a contract is exactly what it becomes. Executives are asked about that $1.50 price on earnings calls by analysts in front of investors. In 2024, the chief financial officer used one of those calls to state directly that the price was safe. The current chief executive has said the same. That is a remarkable thing to observe. A publicly traded company using earnings call time to reassure the market about a hot dog. Understand why it happens. The item is not food, it is a signal. The signal reads as follows: if we would not raise this price, we will not quietly raise any of the others. The member does not verify that claim. They do not need to. They saw the price on the board, unchanged, on the way out. These are not perks. They are promises no future owner can take back. So where does the money actually come from? Start at the obvious layer and work down. Layer 1 is merchandise. In fiscal 2024, net sales were $249.6 billion. That is the number people quote. It is also the least interesting number in this business. Layer 2 is the private label. Kirkland Signature was created in 1995, named after the town in Washington where Costco was then headquartered. By 2025, Kirkland Signature was generating roughly $90 billion in annual sales. That was an increase of about $15 billion in a single year. Sit with the size of that. One store brand, larger than most of the branded companies it sits beside on the shelf. Here is where it gets interesting. Kirkland Signature is not primarily a margin play. It is a threat. Every national brand on your shelf knows the rule. Fail to deliver on price or innovation, and a Kirkland version appears beside you. That knowledge does the negotiating for you. The brand lowers its price before you ask. There is a second effect, and it is the one the shelf does not show you. When Kirkland Signature takes a category, the national brand does not simply lose that shelf. It loses the ability to set a reference price anywhere. The member now knows what the item is actually worth. Layer 3 is fuel. The station in the parking lot sells gasoline cheap. The price is designed to annoy every other station nearby. It is not there to earn. It is there to create a reason to drive over. Understand what fuel really is in this structure. It is a frequency device. A member fills a cart perhaps twice a month. A member fills a tank far more often. Every fill is another trip to your parking lot, and a meaningful share of those trips continue through the door. Layer 4 is everything bolted onto the side of the building. The pharmacy, the optical department, the hearing aid center, the tire bay. Each of those is a service with an appointment attached, and an appointment is a scheduled return visit. Layer 4 is the executive membership. Members pay $130 per year and receive an annual 2% reward on qualifying purchases. That reward is capped. As of September 2024, the cap rose from $1,000 to $1,250. Look at what that does. To collect the full reward, a member must spend $62,500 in a year. Almost nobody does, but the cap tells them the ceiling exists, and the reward tells them that spending spending more is efficient. Layer 5 is the one that pays for everything: membership fees. In fiscal 2024, membership fee revenue was $4.8 billion. In the fourth quarter of fiscal 2025, membership fee income reached $1,724 million. That was up 14%. Paid memberships ended fiscal 2025 at 81 million, up 6.3%. Executive memberships reached 38.7 million, up 9.3%. Membership fees are around 2% of total revenue. They are also close to 2/3 of net income. The warehouse is not the revenue. It is the reason the revenue renews. Now open the other side of the book, because the costs here are self-inflicted and permanent. Read that again. The largest line is the merchandise itself, and this is where you do something no ordinary retailer would do. You cap your own markup. Costco generally holds third-party vendor margins to around 14%. Most items sit in the single digits. Kirkland Signature items are permitted a slightly higher ceiling of about 15%. For comparison, typical supermarket retail margins run between 24 and 30%. You have voluntarily surrendered roughly half of the markup your competitors take. That is not generosity. That is architecture, and it means the merchandise operation can never be the profit engine, no matter how large it grows. Below that sits payroll, above $30 per hour on average across a workforce of 341,000 people, with health coverage and retirement contributions attached. That is not a retail cost structure. That is closer to a manufacturing cost structure. Below that sit the buildings. Refrigeration running constantly across 914 warehouses, lighting a space with no ceiling to speak of. Forklifts, fuel pumps, tire bays, pharmacies, and optical departments. Property tax on land you deliberately chose to own rather than lease. Then there is the reward you hand back. The 2% executive reward is a real cash outflow, paid annually to 38.7 million members. You raised the ceiling on it in 2024 in the same breath as you raised the fee. Then there is the inventory itself, and here you do something unusual again. You carry a fraction of the item count a supermarket carries. Fewer choices, larger packages, faster movement. That is not laziness. That is leverage. When you carry one brand of an item instead of 9, the order you place is enormous. And an enormous order is the only argument a buyer ever needs. It also cuts your own costs. Fewer items means fewer suppliers, fewer invoices, fewer shelf resets, and less unsold product to write down. Your buyers are rewarded for volume through a single item, not for the margin taken on it. That single incentive shapes every purchase decision in the company. And then there is the thing you do not charge for at all: the samples, the free carts, the receipt checker, the returns policy that accepts things a normal retailer would refuse, the hot dog that has not moved since 1985. Every one of those is a line item. None of them appear on a receipt. Every dollar you saved was budgeted before you walked in. And here is the trap. You have now built a company that cannot make money selling things. That is not an exaggeration. That is the arithmetic. You cap your merchandise margin at roughly 14%. Then you spend on wages, refrigeration, land, samples, and rewards. You also run a permanently unprofitable food court. What remains from merchandise is close to nothing, which means the profit has to come from somewhere else entirely. It comes from the fee. Membership fees are roughly 2% of the revenue and close to 66% of the net income. There is almost no cost of goods attached to a membership card. The member pays $65, and $65 survives the journey to the bottom line largely intact. So the entire company rests on one number: not sales, not traffic, renewal. Look at the first quarter of fiscal 2025. Renewal rates stood at 92.8% in the United States and Canada. Worldwide, the rate was 90.4%. In fiscal 2024, the company reported a 90% renewal rate across nearly 137 million cardholders. Now imagine that number slips, not collapses, slips. A few percentage points of renewal decline does not dent your sales meaningfully. Members who leave were mostly low spenders anyway, but those few points come straight out of profit, because that is where the profit lives. The merchandise business cannot absorb the loss, because the merchandise business was never designed to produce a cushion. So you reach for the obvious lever. You raise the fee, and that is the trapdoor. Every increase in the fee raises the bar the member must clear to feel that the membership was worth it. Raise it too far, and the renewal rate you depend on is the exact thing you damage. The only lever that fixes the problem is the same lever that causes it. This is legal. This is normal. You have built a machine that must give away its merchandise margin to keep the renewal, and it must protect the renewal because the margin is already gone. There is no exit from that loop. There is only the discipline to keep running it. That is not a discount policy. That is a trapdoor with your name on it. So who designed the trapdoor, and why would anyone build a business this way on purpose? His name was Sol Price, and he was a lawyer. In 1954, Price opened the first FedMart in San Diego. It was a members-only discount operation, originally serving government employees and their families. The idea was simple and slightly heretical. Take a very small markup, make the money back on volume, refuse to advertise your way out of the problem. It worked well enough that a German retailer bought the company, and in 1975, the new owners removed Sol Price from the business he had built. He was 59 years old. On July 12, 1976, Price opened Price Club with his son Robert. The location was a converted airplane hangar in San Diego. The initial customers were business buyers only. The concept was the same as FedMart, taken further. Almost no markup, almost no advertising, no decoration, and a fee at the door. In its first year, Price Club lost $750,000. Adjusted for inflation, that is roughly $4.6 million in 2025 money. The model looked like a failure, because the model does not work at small scale. It cannot. A margin that thin only survives on volume, and volume takes years to build. Price kept going. By its peak in 1992, Price Club operated 94 warehouses across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Annual business ran to $6.6 billion. He would not accept credit cards for years because he did not want people borrowing money to buy his goods. In 1993, Price Club merged with Costco to form Price Costco. The combined company had 206 stores and $16 billion in sales. The stock swap was valued at more than $2 billion. Jim Sinegal, who founded Costco, had worked under Sol Price for years before that. Asked what he learned from him, Sinegal has said, in effect, everything. What Price understood, and what almost nobody copied correctly, was the source of the profit. He was not trying to earn on the goods. He was trying to earn on the relationship. The goods were proof that the relationship was worth keeping. That is a strange thing to build. It requires you to give away the obvious business in order to protect the invisible one. It requires patience that public markets rarely permit, and it requires the discipline to refuse every easy percentage point forever. Sol Price died in 2009 at the age of 93. Sam Walton studied his methods and used them. So did a long line of retailers who came after. He did not invent a store. He invented a toll booth with shelves. Now watch what happens to someone who copies the shelves and forgets the toll booth. Pace Membership Warehouse was founded in 1983. That is the same year Costco opened and the same year Sam's Club opened. 3 companies, 1 idea, 1 starting line. In 1989, the Kmart Corporation acquired Pace for $322 million. At that point, Pace had 41 locations. Kmart already owned the American locations of another warehouse operation and folded those into Pace in 1990. In 1991, Pace bought the 17-unit Price Savers chain and converted those as well. By then, Pace was the 4th largest warehouse club in the country. It had over 100 locations and a giant retailer behind it. It had everything: capital, scale, real estate, and a parent company with national buying power. It did not have the renewal. Pace expanded aggressively into markets like Houston and Dallas, where entrenched competitors were already established. The economics of a warehouse club are unforgiving in that situation. Your margin is already near zero by design. Your only protection is a membership base that renews without being persuaded. You open into a market where the members already belong to someone else. You have no margin to fight with. You cannot cut prices because your prices were already cut. You cannot advertise your way in because advertising is a cost the model does not carry. There was a second problem, and it was structural rather than geographic. Pace was owned by a parent whose own business was struggling. Kmart needed capital for its other priorities. The warehouse division became a source of funds, not a recipient. A thin-margin business cannot survive being treated as a cash source. It has no reserve by construction. Every dollar removed comes out of the only thing keeping the member loyal, which is the price. So Pace bled. Here is where it gets interesting. Look at how it ended, and look specifically at the number. In November 1993, Kmart announced it would sell 91 Pace warehouse locations to Walmart's Sam's Club division. The net proceeds were approximately $300 million. That figure was equal to Pace's net tangible book value. There was no premium. Nothing was paid for the brand, the members, the customer lists, or the future earnings. The buyer paid for the buildings and the inventory, and nothing else. After a decade of operation and hundreds of millions in investment, the going concern was valued at zero. Kmart then took a pre-tax charge of approximately $450 million. That charge covered closing the roughly 41 locations Sam's Club did not want. The sale closed in early 1994. The locations became Sam's Clubs. Pace memberships were honored until they expired, and then they were gone. Pace did not lose a price war. Pace never owned a renewal. So look again at what you own. You own 914 buildings. You own the land under most of them. You employ 341,000 people and pay them more than any comparable retailer. You do that because turnover is more expensive than wages. You sell roughly $90 billion of your own brand. You move $249.6 billion of merchandise a year at a markup half the size of a supermarket's. And after all of that, count what is actually left over. Roughly 2/3 of it came from a $65 fee. That fee has nothing to do with any of it. The warehouse is not the business. The warehouse is the argument. Everything inside it exists to make one specific decision 12 months from now feel obvious. The samples, the receipt checker, the rotisserie chicken priced below what it costs, the hot dog frozen in 1985, the tire bay, the gasoline that is cheaper than the station across the road. None of those are products. They are evidence. They exist so that when the renewal notice arrives, the member does not think about it. That is the entire design. Not to win the transaction, to win the non-decision. That is why the margin is capped. A capped margin is not a discount. It is a promise made in advance that the member will never have a reason to run the numbers. The moment a member runs the numbers and the answer is close, you have already lost. The answer has to be so far from close that the question never forms. Look at the two numbers side by side, one more time. Merchandise moves $249.6 billion a year and produces almost nothing. Membership moves $4.8 billion and produces most of the profit. Almost every retailer in the world reads that and draws the wrong conclusion. They see a fee attached to a store. What is actually there is a store attached to a fee. Sol Price understood this in a converted airplane hangar in 1976, losing $750,000 in his first year. Pace never understood it, backed by a national retailer, and was sold for the value of its shelving in 1993. So you walk in, the cart is enormous, the ceiling is exposed, the chicken is cheap, you feel like you are getting away with something. Understand what is actually happening. You are not getting away with anything. You are being shown your evidence. Costco is not a retailer. It is a subscription company that operates a warehouse at cost in order to protect the subscription. The merchandise is not the product. The savings are not the product. You are not the customer.